friends, I welcome you all on my channel, The Opinion Platform. There's a disturbing video making rounds on digital media platforms, in which an American soldier, only 25 years old American soldier, who claims to have belonged to Air Force, he has committed self-immolation in front of Israeli embassy in Washington of America. This self-immolation video has created controversy, outrage, and it has forced the global people and the global world to rethink over the acts of violence, genocide, which is going in Gaza in the name of controlling and wiping out, as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said that it will wipe out the terrorists from Gaza, and in the name of wiping out the terrorists, civilians, innocent civilians, kids, family members, doctors, nurses, all kinds of servicemen are being brutally massacred, killed, and they are subjected to genocidal acts. In protest against this genocidal act, an American soldier has come forward, has committed self-immolation, and continuously kept shouting till he died that he will not fight against innocent people, and Palestine, which is Palestine, must be freed at all costs. To speak on this issue, we have scholars from Jawaharlal Nehru University, Center for Historical Studies, Surbhi Watts, Dr. Chandrabhan, and Aman. She's an activist. She's a playwright as well. She's a director of many wonderful theatre, which also vociferously support and speak for humanitarian cause. Well, we'll try to understand first from Dr. Chandrabhan, how does he look at this act of self-immolation of this American soldier?
Dharmaraj, this is an act of greatest compassion, I will say, because in this act, what is happening, the one, if we look at his subjective position, he's a soldier, American soldier, and he has to fight a war against Gaza. So his positionality is of suppressor, and within the international political relation, if we look at the situation, his positionality is quite of a the nationality to which he belongs suggests he comes from the suppressors. Now, what is happening through this act? He is extending his friendship, his compassion to the ones who are suppressed, the people of Palestine and so on. Now, in history, the act of self-immolation or suicides have generally been from the communities which are exploited, suppressed. So we were talking about the recent suicides in the context of India. The one ad hoc teacher committed suicide in Delhi University. He was teaching philosophy at Hindu College, and prior to that we have also seen Rohit Vemula's suicide. And then there are lots of data which suggest how the students are in a way forced to commit suicide. So in that situation, what happens to oppose one's suppression, to get out of this violence which is in a way forced upon the body of the exploited ones, they commit suicide to get away from that suppression. Now in this the person Aaron Bushnell is coming from the as I was saying, his positionality is different. So it's a greatest act of compassion, I would say, and he should be remembered, and he will be remembered for this great courage which he has performed.
Dr. Chandrabhan has rightly spoken that it is the way suicides, self-immolation and all these acts have had or have had impact in the past need to be reinterpreted, and it is a kind of revolt against all kinds of injustice. Well, I'll ask Surbhi to understand how she looks at this act of self-immolation.
Thank you, Dharmaraj. First off, I want to start off by obviously paying my deepest regards and salutes, revolutionary salutes to Aaron Bushnell, who sort of on the world stage came out and made such a strong statement. And like Chandrabhan said, the statement is not going to be forgotten in either near or far future. But I want to jump off from the point where Chandrabhan mentioned that there are two terms that we are working with here. One is suicide and the other is self-immolation. Right? There's a reason why we are calling it self-immolation and not suicide. Usually because suicide has both, it has socio-political connotations to it, which are not necessarily seen in a very positive light usually. Suicide, as you also mentioned in our conversations prior to this interview, are usually seen as a criminal act, and not seen as a criminal act but deemed criminal by the governments in most nations all over the world, right? In the light of this kind of knowledge, that the idea of, there's a new term that is trending these days, unaliving, and even though the word actually comes from trying to bypass the algorithm of social media, we're using words like death or killing or suicide or self-harm. They tend to decrease the visibility of your posts, which is also something which is happening with the posts about Gaza and Palestine, precisely because they are about mass killings. Their visibility is automatically reduced, not automatically so much, but systematically reduced using the algorithm of Facebook or Twitter, etc., etc. So in the light of this kind of a system where the idea of harming yourself or unaliving yourself or killing yourself or immolating yourself is seen as a criminal act, I would say that we need to sort of go back to some of our older philosophers, both existential as well as feminist, who talk about the idea of body politic, right? The idea of having an autonomous right over your own body. What stronger a statement could there be of that than ending your own life? Because clearly we are not in control of starting our own. So the only way in which a person can actually assert the absolute right over their own body or over their own lives is by taking it. So even if we look at this act of self-immolation from the point of view of philosophy, from the point of view of body rights, definitely this is an act of great courage. This is an act of reclamation. It's an act of reclamation of a young man who was turned into a cog in a large war machinery by the most belligerent state in the world, America. And here is a young man who is saying, no, I will not be allowing the state to use my body as a part of the war machinery, right? This man is reclaiming his body by taking away his life. Even if it is by taking away his life, he's reclaiming his right over his own body, his own life, and challenging this state machinery by saying that if the youth stops supporting you, if the youth starts reclaiming what is their own, if the youth stops pandering to the propaganda of these nation states, then where do the nation states land up? If it's the youth that revolts against the war machinery, how will the war machinery run? And on this note, I would want to go back to some of the historical junctures that are important when we try to put all of these dots together and connect all of them together. When we look at, say, for instance, the Tibetan resistance against China, more than 150 people till date have self-immolated as a way of protest against the Chinese occupation of Tibet, right? Similarly, in 1963, that is one of the first self-immolations which were done in public and which were recorded on camera. It was recorded on camera. A Buddhist monk, a Vietnamese Buddhist monk, he immolated himself in the center of Saigon as an act of resistance against the American occupation of Vietnam. Now the interesting thing is that even when we look at this act of suicide or self-immolation as an act of violence, it is a kind of counter-violence, right? And at the same time, if we go back to somebody like Fanon, right, counter-violence is as important to really challenge the violence of the state as is writing and speaking and talking about the fact that, you know, peace needs to be maintained. Sometimes this kind of violence is also required. So even if there are people who look at this, even though I personally do not look at this act of self-immolation as an act of violence, even if it is to be looked at as a violent act, because as I was mentioning earlier, these videos, they are stopped from circulation by calling them violent videos, that they show violence which can have a bad impact on the viewer's mind, the viewer's state of mind, etc. They can be triggering. And while they are triggering, we need to understand that these acts are acts of counter-violence and not of violence. So this young man, he's also sort of carrying forward the legacy of counter-violence, which was started in the 1960s with the students' movement in the West, right? The entire student movement, American universities, I mean students from American universities who came together, students from European universities who came together to not just reclaim their bodies. It was, if you remember, the student movement of the 1960s was as much a sexual revolution, sexual and romantic revolution, as it was a revolution against the Vietnam War, right? As it was a revolution against imperial forces all over the world. So I also feel like this act, and as Chandrabhan was saying, this man, this young guy, and he's 25 years young, not 25 years old. He's younger than all of us who are sitting here together, right? Interestingly, this young man is also carrying forward the legacy of those students who were putting sunflowers and roses in the barrels of rifles of men who were trying to go to Vietnam and kill people there. So I also feel like this act is perhaps and hopefully going to be a start of something very important. It's hopefully going to be a start of the kind of resistance that came from the American public against the Vietnam War. Hopefully a similar tirade from the American public against the American government and the hegemonic presence that it has, the hegemonic sort of support that it's providing to Israel. Hopefully a tirade against that will come from within the public also, within the public of the most important and most belligerent state in the world right now. So I feel like Aaron Bushnell's act of self-immolation at the same time is making a statement about Gaza, about Palestine, about bodily autonomy, about body politic, about a history of young people standing up for what is right and putting down arms and ammunition in front of states and saying, we are not going to fight anymore. We are not going to fight your wars anymore. So yeah, revolutionary salutes to Aaron Bushnell.
To speak on this issue, we also have the artist Aman Mohammadi. We will also try to understand that how the art world has equally been shaken, in fact more shaken, because the paintings which are coming, social media platforms are flooded with most humane paintings ever produced from the day 7th October has seen the starting of Israel-Hamas war, in which thousands of innocent lives are lost, kids are massacred, butchered. We'll try to understand how, as an artist, Aman looks at this act of self-immolation.
Starting by saying that whatever is happening around us is very unfortunate, and this act actually makes me think about this play by Mahashweta Devi, in which the character Draupadi, who was assaulted, raped, being the what Surbhi also highlighted, the right of one's body. So no matter the amount of assault that body witnessed, towards the end, that body stands and tries to walk against these hegemonic, these structures who try to subjugate that body. and she's walking with blood all over her body, and and as a result, we also saw those mothers of Manipur who stood against, who came up with their bare bodies, and they tried to stand against this, this force that was trying to subjugate them, assault them. I think I don't have much to say, because of course it's very triggering, and belonging to a minority myself, I know what it does to me to think about what is happening in Gaza. And this act of immolation is for me a cry of helplessness. It's an absolute cry of helplessness. It also, like Surbhi mentioned about body, so as a body, if you dig into the psyche of it, we have, like my psychologists always say, there is always a choice that one has. So this act of immolation was a choice that one had out of the helplessness, out of a solidarity, out of, when you're left with no hope, what do you do in that? When there is hopelessness around you, when you cannot, you know that your agency is limited, but you also have a choice. And it's very, very unfortunate that a life has to, succumb to stand against these heinous crimes that are happening around us. And as an artist, I can only say that for us, body plays a very, very significant role. And this loss of a life is, I don't know how many lives will be shaken by it. What is going to happen in a larger context? But, and how many people can do such, or can die to kind of express their solidarity? It's a very revolutionary act, but it's also very, like I said, very unfortunate. But in these times, my only question is, what is that we are left with? If to save other lives, we also have to die, what exactly we are left with at the end of the day?
We heard opinions about how the act of Aaron Bushnell has been received globally. It's not that only in the university like JNU, people are outraged, people are sad, and people also see hope, even in such acts of resistance. But across the globe, it has created such a huge burden, even in America, that Joe Biden has yesterday in the evening announced that by the coming Monday, there can be the announcement of ceasefire between Israel and Hamas war, which has been consistently the demand, which is passed also in the UNO, but it was not paid due attention. Against the act of genocide by powerful country like Israel, Aaron Bushnell has shown the world the most glorious act of kindness by putting his life on fire by committing self-immolation. For those people who believe in pseudo-constitutionality of the world governance, they understand that committing any kind of act which leads to the death of even of an individual is a crime. Aaron Bushnell has challenged such people with their pseudo notions that if you so much worry for the life of the people, bringing them back to the constitutional frame, then we must be fair, we must be genuine in our concern. Each and every life is equally important. This was the reason Aaron Bushnell, while putting himself on fire, continuously kept shouting that he will not fight against Palestine, and Palestine must be freed at any cost. With this, I say goodbye to you all for this show. I would request to you that if you like my discussion on my channel, The Opinion Platform, like it, subscribe it and share it. And for such humanitarian concerns, for such cause, please get connected. Thank you very much.